What's up guys, welcome to another crash course, and in this crash course we're going to learn Node.js. We're going to learn the basics of Node.js, what is Node.js, and we'll also look at some core modules of Node.js. And in the end we're also going to create a server and do some backend stuff along with it, alright? So if you're really a beginner at Node.js, or even if you don't know Node.js, that doesn't matter. That's because you're here for, and this crash course will really help you get started along the way, alright? So without further ado, let's get started. So before going on towards Node.js and learning about all these things, I do want to talk a little bit about backend development, alright? So if you're from a different backend environment language such as PHP, or if you're coming from Python, then learning Node.js won't be difficult for you, because since you know how the backend works, it's just the language, alright? But if you're really new at backend development and those stuffs, then backend development is where you work on the server side, alright? Previously in the front end, what you have is basically what the client sees, or it's the client side, okay? In case of backend development, you need to handle the database, and you also need to handle the client's request and give them back the response, alright? So basically what happens is that, let's consider this with an example, alright? So if I open my Chrome browser and if I type in like any URL, let's say YouTube, alright? So basically what I'm doing is sending a request to the server and saying, hey, I want the main homepage of YouTube. And what that server will do is give you a response, and that response will be nothing but the main homepage of YouTube, alright? And along with that, the server will also fetch some data, alright? Because when you first open the YouTube, you will see those recommended videos, right? So those recommended videos are there in your database. So server will fetch some data from the database, and it will also return you the data along with that HTML page. And that's how backend development at the core works, all right? So it is the job of a backend developer to handle the client request and also give them back the response. Okay, so basically backend developer handles three things at the core. All right, the first one is routing, which you talked about just now. Client sends a request and you give them the response. And the next thing that the backend developer does is secure your application and also authentication. All right, so meaning there are some pages that you might not want the users to see. For example, the admin pages. All right, so you just want the admin to see that. And for that, you create a security system or something like that. So that is basically done by the backend developer. Okay. And the third one is database handling. All right. So creating the database, also, sending some data from the database depending on the client's request, those kind of things is done by the backend developer. All right. So, if all these things doesn't make sense to you, then just try to understand the client server and database relationship. All right. So basically, client sends the request to the server then responds to the request. If that request needs some data from the database, it returns that data, or else it just returns the basic HTML page. Alright, so now enough about backend development. Let's talk about Node.js. Alright, so what is Node.js? Now, if you think that Node.js is a framework or a backend language, then you are completely wrong. Alright, Node.js is not a framework, neither a language. Node.js is a JavaScript runtime environment. Now, this word might make you confused, or make you what or something like that, but a JavaScript runtime environment is an environment where your JavaScript works. All right. For example, if you're working with your normal JavaScript, you're actually running that in your Google Chrome, right? You kind of link that with your HTML, and then you just open the browser in your Chrome or your Firefox, whatever, and you run there. Node.js is also similar to that. You basically run your JavaScript code in Node.js as well. So it is that JavaScript runtime environment where you can use or compile your JavaScript code. Now, it is built on Chrome's V8 Javascript engine. Now, a JavaScript engine, what it does is basically convert your JavaScript code into the machine code, because at the end, a computer is just a machine, right? So it doesn't understand our language, so it just understands the language of zeros and ones. JavaScript engine converts whatever JavaScript code that you had written into the machine code so that the computer can understand. And Chrome uses V8 JavaScript engine. Firefox uses SpiderMonkey, And I don't know about the other browsers, but I just know this too. So Node.js is also built on Chrome's V8 JavaScript engine. Whatever the JavaScript engine Chrome is using, which is V8, Node is also using the same JavaScript engine. All right. So basically, a Node.js is an environment where your JavaScript code works, and it is built on Chrome's V8 JavaScript engine. All right. So it's not a framework, it's not a language, it's an environment. And this environment is mostly used in order to build a server-side application. So if you're very good with your JavaScript, if you're very good with ECMAScript or classes and all those things, then learning Node.js won't be a difficult task for you guys. And if you're not, then I do recommend you to brush up your JavaScript skills along the way, or after brushing your skills, you can come back and watch this video. Now, before moving forward and writing code and all those things, I do want to talk about Node.js modules, all right? Because most of the time, you'll just be, adding a module and, working along with that. Because in Node.js, you have lots and lots of modules. And most of the time, you will be adding those modules in your application and, using some functions of that modules. So, what is a module? A module is basically a JavaScript file, all right? Now, that file may contain a function or a class or whatever. So let's take an example here. So we have a file called add.js here, and it has basically a function which is add, and it's taking two parameters, num1 and num2, and it's basically returning num1 plus num2, all right, the sum of two numbers. And here it's written module.exports add. So basically what this code is doing is exporting this function. All right. Now module and exports are something called globals, which I'm going to talk about later on. Right. But just for now, remember that module.export equals to add is exporting this function. All right. Now, as this function is being exported, you can actually use this exported function into some other JavaScript files. So let's say this is our main application file, and in our application file we want to use this function, which is add, all right, and it's already been exported. So what we're basically doing is importing add function right here, okay, by saying require. Now require is also a global. Again, I'm going to talk about global later on. So what require does is it just imports, okay, imports that function. So it's importing here, and that function is being assigned as addnum in this file, and we're just console.logging. By the way, it's not add, it's addnum, okay, this should be addnum. I'm really sorry about that, but we'll be console logging addnum and sending those two parameters, and in our output it will return 5. By calling this, we're actually calling this function, okay, and this function is returning the sum of two numbers, okay. So we are basically passing these two numbers, and in return we're getting this 5. So what I want you to understand is that some functions or objects or class or methods, whatever that is, you can actually export that from one file, and you can import that in another file and use those functions there. And that is the basic mechanism of modules. Now in Node.js, there will be several modules that you'll be using, right? Now some of them might be the core modules that the Node.js has. Now Node.js has a lot of core modules, all right? And we'll be going through some of them, all right? So you might be using that. You might also be using local modules. Now local module is nothing but what you saw here. You're creating your own module, and you are using that. So that's basically your local modules. You might also do that. Or you might also use an external library or an external dependency in your application, for example, Express. Again, as I said earlier, in Node.js, you'll be dealing with, I keep stressing this word on modules because, the rest of the thing is just basic JavaScript, okay? The only thing is, you are using those modules in order to create your application. Alright, so I'm in the official page of Node.js. So now, since Node.js is a runtime environment, you need to download it and install it in your system. Alright, so basically Node.js has two versions. One is the stable one, and one is the current or the latest one. So I do recommend you guys to download the stable one and just install it in your system. The installation process is really simple. Alright, so after you've installed Node.js in your system, you can actually open your terminal. So let me open command prompt, and basically you can just type node, and what this will do is just create that environment where you can write to JavaScript. So let's write console.log, let's say hello, and if you run this, and there you go, it's returning hello. Now since you install Node, it's creating an environment, so your JavaScript is working here as well. Alright, now I don't use terminal in order to create my or execute my JavaScript very often. In fact, I never use this things, but I do wanted you guys to know that now the JavaScript can also work in terminal like this as well. Alright, so let's close this up. Now I've already created a folder called Node. You can create anywhere that you want, okay, and this will basically be our working folder. So let's open this up in our VS Code. Alright, so I've opened the Node folder inside my VS Code as well. For the text editor, I do recommend you guys to use VS Code because it has the inbuilt terminal and it'll be easier to compile your Node file. But if you have your favorite IDE, Atom or Sublime, you can go for that as well. Alright, so before talking about anything, let me show you the module system right here. Alright, because I know that I explained it earlier, but just explaining in that image just won't work. Alright, so let me create a file called app.js, and by the way, all we're doing is just JavaScript. Alright, just remember that. Now Node.js is not anything new or any language or any framework, as I said earlier. Alright, it's just JavaScript. So let me also create add.js. We're just implementing the example that I talked about earlier. So in our add.js, we're going to create a function called const and say add equals to function, and basically this function will take two parameters, num1 and num2, and what this function will do is just return the sum of two numbers. Alright, so num1 plus num2. Okay, alright, so basically this function is taking two numbers, num1 and num2, and returning the sum of two numbers. Alright, now in order to use this function in our app.js, we need to export it from here. Alright, and in order to do that, we're gonna use a global. Alright, now again, I'm gonna talk about global later on, so just bear with me guys. Let's just write module.export equals to add, and there you go. Now this add function, which is right here, is exported. Now in order to use that function, which is add, in our app.js, we need to import this add. Okay, now in order to import that, we're going to need another global called require and say /add. Okay, because that's where our add.js file is. All right, and we're going to actually put this in a variable, so const add num equals to require add. Okay, so basically we're just calling this module add.js. Alright, again, as I said earlier, module is nothing but a JavaScript file. So we are requiring, or we are calling this file add.js, and we are adding whatever it is exporting inside this add num. Okay, so here it is exporting this function, which is add, and that we are actually putting inside add num. So now if I call add num, and basically add num is now nothing but this function. So, and in the parentheses, let's just say 2,3, because it is gonna expect two numbers. And let me just console log this. Save that, and let's open our terminal. And in order to run the JavaScript file, all you need to do is say node and write the name of the file that you want to run, or which for me it's gonna be app.js. All right, let's enter that, and there you go, it's giving us 5 as an output. Okay, so basically what happened was, in our add.js we created a function, exported that, in our app.js, we called that function, okay, and used it here. So what I want you guys to understand with the help of this example, okay, is that there will be lots and lots of modules like this with several methods or functions, whatever. And in your main application, instead of creating by scratch or creating on your own, you can just call those function and use it here, and that will be much easier for you. Alright, so I'm back again in my Node.js official page. So let's go to documentation here. Let's go to this version because this is the version that I'm using. And again, as I said earlier, Node.js has lots of core modules, and these are basically those modules. Alright, whatever that you're seeing here. So the first thing I'm going to talk about here is, where is that? Globals. Now, global objects or globals in general is basically something like a global variable. Global variable can be used anywhere, right? Similarly, global objects can also be used anywhere, and these are especially Node.js specific objects, okay? And you don't need to import any module or anything in order to use these globals. As I said earlier, export is a global, module is a global, and require is also a global. So as I said earlier, this module is a global, exports is also a global, and require is also a global. That's why in order to use these functions, we did not had to call any module, and it can be used anywhere. All right. Global objects are also similar to the window object. All right. In a normal JavaScript, what you do is say, let me just show you with an example. Let's inspect this. Open the console. So here, if I say window.alert, you might have used this in your JavaScript, and let's say hello. If I do that, a window will pop up saying hello. All right. Now, instead of window.alert, you can also do this by simply writing alert hello and enter, and again it shows that window. And if you've used alert in your JavaScript, you don't need to call any functions or methods or any you don't need to import anything. Okay, you can just write alert and a window will pop up just like this. So global objects are also somewhat similar to window object. Instead of this console.log, you can also say global.console.log, and if you just save this and if you say node app.js, and it will give you the same thing because console.log is a method of global object in Node.js. Now, you don't have a global object in your normal JavaScript, all right? You have what is called a window object, but in Node.js, you have a global object. Just remember like that, okay? So let me just remove this, save that. Now, I talked about require, I talked about exports, I talked about, module.exports. Module.exports, what it does is just exports whatever you define here, and require, what it does is that it just calls those methods that you have exported. All right. Now, another global that I want to talk about is dir name and file name. Okay, so here instead of addnum, if I say __ dir name, and if I save this, and if I say node app.js, and this will give me the directory name of the file. The file is app.js, and dir name will give me the directory name of this file right here, which is user/del/desktop/node. All right. And similarly, file name will give me, let's see, node.js, sorry, node app.js. So the file node will give me the directory along with the file name. All right. And these globals are really important because you'll be needing this along your way. And there are lots of other global objects as well. I'm just going through some of the very common ones. you can actually check out the documentation. I highly recommend you guys to read this documentation, okay, and try some of the methods. So that's about the globals. Basically, it is something that you can use in your application, and you don't need to import or do anything for that. And the globals, some globals which are really important are module.exports, require, file name, dir name, console.log is also global, and there is clear interval, clear mediate, clear timeout. If you have done if you're familiar with JavaScript, you might be familiar with this functions as well. So I do recommend you guys to try some of them out, okay? All right, so that's basically about the globals and the module system. Okay, now let's talk about some of the core modules in Node.js. Now I'm not going to talk about all the core modules, okay, because if you look at the documentation here, there's way a lot of modules, and I don't think I'm going to ever finish the crash course if I go one by one. So I'm going to talk about few of them which are really common ones, and trust me, you won't be needing all the modules and you won't be using all the modules in your application. So among the core modules, the first one I'm going to talk about is the path module. Okay, so again, let's go to the documentation here, and I think it's here. Yep. So as the name suggests, path module is provides some functions for working with files and directory paths, and this is how you call the path module. All right, so let's go to our VS Code right here, and let's create another file saying path.js. So let's call the path modules. So const path equals to require path, and that's it. Now the first method that I'm going to talk about from this module is path.basename. Okay, so if we consider this right here, this entire directory of a file, the base name is basically a file name, which is app.js, and the rest is just your directory name. All right, so from this file name we can actually get just the base name, which is app.js. All right, so we can do that with the help of path.basename, and here it will basically expect file name, so -- file name, and let's just console log this one. So console.log. all right, let's save that, and here let's just say node path.js. let's run that, and there you go, path.js. The entire file name would have been c/user/del/node/desktop/node/app.js, but with the help of path.basename we just took out path.js. all right, so that's the function of this method right here. Now we can also get the directory of this file with this path, which is path.js. all right, you can basically do that with dir name as well, but I'm going to show you how you can do that with the help of path modules. So you can say, first let's comment this out. So you can say path.dir name, and here let me just add a file name, and let's just console log this one, console.log. Again, file name will give you the directory name along with this file name. all right, so let's just save that, and let's say node path, and there you go, it's giving me the directory name of this file, which is path.js. all right, let's comment this out as well. Now we can also get the extension name of a particular file with the help of path module. all right, so let's say path.ext name, and inside that let's create let's say index.html. oops, I wrote s, let's change it to a, and let's just console log the entire thing. Let's save that and say node path, and there you go. It's just giving me the extension, which is .html. If I, instead of index.html, I write style style.css, save that and say node path, and there you go. It's giving me .css, which is the extension. So you can also do things like that. And by the way, all these things are basically in your documentation. Okay, this path.basename and path.ext name, path.dir name. All right, now the next thing that I want to talk about, which you might use a little bit, okay, and it is a function of this path module. So, and that is path.join. Okay, and what it does is just joins to path. For example, now it will take some parameters. Okay, so let the first parameters be // dir name, okay, which gives me the directory name of this path. Okay, that is c/something/something/node. And the next parameter that I want to write is, let's say, custom path.js. okay, it's just I just created this out of my own. So now what this path.join will do is that it will get the directory name, all right, which is c/something/blah/blah//node, and it will also look this custom path.js, and it will join these two things. All right, it will join the directory name with customer path.js. So if you just console.log this, and let's save that, and here let's just say node path, enter, and there you go. Starting from here till here is your directory name, which is the dir name, and then you have customer path.js. So path.join is basically joining these two things. Now you can also do more than that. You can also join more than two paths. Okay, so let's say custom app.js. let's save that. Let's go here and say node path, and there you go, custom path.js/custom app.js. so you can actually create more than two parameters. Okay, it's not that you just have to create two parameters, but the main thing you have to take from here is that path.join joins to path. All right, and the last thing about this module that I want to talk about is something called path.parse, and basically it will create an object, and that object will hold the information about that path. So here let me just say file name. All right, and let's just console.log this. Let's just save that and say node path, enter, and there you go. It is basically giving me, let's see, yeah, it's basically giving me an object, and that object is holding every information of that path. For example, the root, the directory name, the base name, the extension, and also the name of the file. And this is basically it about the the path module. All right, now there are lots of objects or functions. You can, again, I keep saying this, but do refer to the documentation, read the documentation, try to play around with some of the objects and some of the methods that are there. All right, and it will really help you guys. So that's your path module, one of the core modules of Node.js. The next module that I want to talk about is the file system module, or the FS module. All right, so let's create a file here saying fs.js. Now the file system module is basically responsible for things that are related to files, okay, like creating a file, or reading a file, or deleting a file, things like that. So, and one of the main methods of this, or a function of this module, is to read a file, because again, as I said earlier, in a client server application, when the client sends a request, the server needs to send a response, and this file system module really helps when you need to read a file, for example index.html file or any other static files. All right, so let's call this by saying const fs equals to require fs. Okay, again, this entire thing is in the documentation, you can check that out. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do here is read a file. Okay, so fs, and in order to do that, you have a method called read file. So fs dot read file, and the first parameter that it will take is the file that you want to read. Okay, now I have not created any files, so let me just create a text file saying file 1, and inside this file 1 I'll just write this is a Node.js crash course, something like that. And here let me just call this file 1. Okay, since we are in the same directory, all you have to do is say // and the name of the directory, so file 1. And the next thing is gonna be a callback. So inside this callback we'll have two parameters: error, first one will be error if there are any errors while calling this method, and also the data. Okay, and this data will basically hold whatever there is inside this file 1. Right, so inside this function we're going to check for error first. So if error, then we're just going to throw error. Else what you're going to do is, actually, let's just console log for now. All right, so console.log data. All right, let's save that, and here let me say node fs, enter, and this is basically giving me some, I don't know, random codes. So in order to get this text instead of this code, all you have to do is here between your callback and the file, you need to create another parameter which is basically for your character encoding, so utf-8. And what this parameter does is basically converts this code into the readable format. So here let me just say node fs. Now it's saying this is a Node.js crash course, which is the content inside this file. So basically what this method is doing is it's reading this file, okay, and it's just displaying that. So this is really important. I think one of the important method of a module. So let me comment this out for now. Now you can also create a new directory. All right, so let's say fs.mkdir. Now this will basically create a new directory in your file folder, and let the new directory name be new directory. All right, and next thing, it will be a callback. It will check for error. If there is any error, then we're just gonna throw that error. Else the directory will be created. So if you save this and say node fs, and if you hit enter, and there you go, the new directory is created. All right, so that's how you create a new directory and read a file. Let me delete this because I won't be needing this file here. All right, now again, there are a lot. If you go to file system here, where's that file system, there are lots and lots of methods that you can use. Okay, so again, do read the documentation, because if I go on talking about all these modules, it'll take me more than 2 or 3 hours to complete this. Now the next module that I want to talk about is the OS module. Alright, so let's create a file called os.js, and basically OS stands for operating system, and it gives you the information about the operating system or the architecture of your computer, or even your host name. Alright, so let's call the OS module. Let's say const os equals to new o equals to require os. Alright, okay, so the first method will be to check the architecture of your computer or laptop. So for that, you have what is called os.arch, and let's just console.log this out, and this will provide you the architecture of your system. So let's say node os. There you go. Mine one is of 64 bits. I don't know what's yours. Okay, and let's comment this out. The next one is os.hostname, and it basically gives the host name. Alright, so console.log os.hostname. Save that. Let's go here and say node os, and it is giving me an error. Okay, so console node os. There you go. You have the host name of user. The next thing is to check the total memory of your system. So console.log, again did the mistake, console.log os.total mem. Alright, and let's just save this and say node os, and this will give you, I think this is in bytes or kilobytes. I think this is in bytes. I need to check the documentation. Let's go to OS here, and total mem right here, and yeah, it returns the total amount of system memory in bytes as an integer. Okay, so this is basically in bytes. And again, there are lots of methods here as well, so to try this out. So I talked about the 3 core modules, which is path, file system, and OS. Alright, now the next module is gonna be a little bit important for you guys, and that is the URL module. Alright, so let's create another file here saying url.js. so let's call that URL module. So const URL equals to require URL. Okay, and as the name suggests, this module deals with the URL. Okay, and one important method of this module is the parse method. Okay, because your URL in general holds a lot of information about your application or your site. Right, now let me just show you with an example. So let's use that parse method. So let's say const my URL equals to url.parse, because what parse is going to do is just create an object, and just like path.parse. Okay, path.parse, what it did was created an object, and inside that object it had a lot of information about that path. Right, similarly url.parse will also create an object, and it will have a lot of information about the URL. So that object I'm actually storing in this my URL variable. Alright, so url.parse, and here let's just write, it'll basically expect a normal URL. Alright, so let's create our own URL. So let's write http slash colon slash slash www dot mywebsite.com, port number 8080 slash let's just write this for now. All right, and let's just do that. So this is our basic URL. All right, it's just console.log my URL. All right, so basically what is happening is that we called our URL module, okay, and we're basically parsing this URL right here, okay, this link. And what this URL.parse is doing is breaking this link into little bits and bits of pieces and just, you know, sending that information to my URL, and I'm just console logging my URL. So let's see what we get here. Let's say node URL, node URL, let's enter, and there you go. It is actually returning an object, and that object holds a lot of information right here. Okay, if you can go here, so this HTTP is nothing but your protocol. All right, this www.mywebsite.com colon 8080 is your host. Okay, 8080 is your port number, and this is your entire link. This is the path, this is the path name. Okay, so the URL or your link itself holds a lot of information about your application, and that information can be broken down with the help of this parse method, and it is really one of the most important methods in your URL. So here, instead of my URL, you can also say my URL. You know, you can also basically call each and every one right here. So my URL dot protocol. If you save this, if you run this again, node URL, and there you go. It's giving me HTTP because this is basically the property of this object URL, right? Basic JavaScript. So if you go here in your URL, then you'll basically see a lot of methods: url.hash, host, hostname, href, origin, password, pathname, port. Okay, and all these are basically actually stored inside this object right here. Okay, all you have to do is say url.protocol or url. Let me see, hostname. If you save that, it will give you node URL, and that will give you your host name, which is www.mywebsite.com. all right, and so this URL module is also really helpful if you want to actually break down any URL and get certain pieces of information from that. All right, okay, so I guess now you are quite familiar with modules and how modules work and some of the Node.js modules. Okay, now I highly recommend you guys to watch or read this documentation again, experiment with it, play along with it. And now the last module that I want to talk about in this crash course is the HTTP module. Okay, and it is one of the most important module because with the help of that module only you can actually create a server or run your JavaScript in the server. So let's create a file saying http.js, and let's call the HTTP module. Okay, const http equals to require http. So the first method from this module that we're going to learn is the create server method, and as the name suggests, create server will just create a server. So const server equals to http dot create server. It's actually a method, and it will require a callback function to run, and that callback function will basically take a request and a response. Again, as I said earlier, the request and response concept. All right, client sends a request to you, you send a response to that client. So let's open this function. Here let's just write to res.write and say hello world. Now I'm going to talk about res.write later on, and also res.end. So let me write a res.end here. And now this is still not enough. Okay, this function basically http.createServer will create a server. However, we need to listen to a port for the server to run. So let's say server dot listen. Okay, and what this does is basically listens to the port, and here let's just you just have to declare the port number. Okay, so let's say 8000. That let's just save it. Let's do node http, and if you go to the browser here, let's open a new tab and say localhost colon 8000, and there you go. It's basically returning hello world, whatever we had written in res.write. So I hope you understood what this means. Instead of hello world, if I write hello, this is nodejs crash course. All right, and here let's just end this, and I can create node. Let me just save that first. Say node http. Let's go here and refresh this, and there you go. Hello, this is nodejs crash course. Okay, so res.write, what this will do is just send you a response, and res.end, what it does is just ends the response process. All right, so this is basically a simple way of creating a server. Again, now right now we just talked about this response. Okay, so let's just also talk about the request that the client is sending. So when we went to localhost 8080, which is basically the home page for this application, we got this response. So this code right here is sending me a response on the home page. You can actually see what the request URL is. Okay, so if I say console.log and say req.url, this will actually give me the URL of a particular request. Okay, so if I break this up, and if I again do node http, and there you go, it's giving me this slash. Okay, so this slash is basically your home page. All right, and that is the request by default, because if you go here to localhost 8000 and if I do a slash here and if I enter, we're gonna get the same thing. Okay, because slash is your home page, and in your home page what our code is basically doing is returning hello, this is nodejs crash course. Now based on this request.url, you can create several routes for your application. Okay, let me show you how you can do that. So instead of this, let's just cut this up. What you can do is add a switch case. So switch, and here let's just write request.url. Okay, so the first case, I hope you are familiar with switch cases and all those things. All right, so first case would be this: if the request is slash, which is your home page. Okay, so what you're going to do, we're going to do this. We're going to send hello, this is nodejs crash course, and we're going to basically end the response. The second case will be slash about. Okay, and here let's say hello, this is about page. All right, let's save that. Let's this up. Let's say node and http. Alright, so if I go to my home page, we'll be getting hello, this is Node.js crash course. But if I go to /about, we'll be getting hello, this is about page. So let's check that out. Okay, here let me go to the home page. We are getting hello, this is Node.js crash course. If I go to /about, and we're not getting anything. All right, and that's because we did not add a break here. Also add a break here, and let me also create a default case. Okay, if it's neither the home page or neither the about page, we're just going to do return something like 404 page not found, 404 page not found. All right, and we're gonna end the response, res.end. Okay, let's try that out again. So node http, let's go here, let's go to localhost 8080. There you go, hello, this is Node.js crash course. If you go to /about, and there you go, hello, this is about page. Okay, so basically request.url, what it holds is whatever request that you type in here. Okay, for example, if I don't write anything, then the request goes as /. If I say if I write anything right here, so /about, the request goes as /about. If I say contact, then the request goes as /contact. Okay, and that is basically stored right here, request.url. So what we're doing is checking the request.url. If whatever request that I've sent is /, all right, then just return hello, this is Node.js crash course. Similarly, if the case is /about, if the request that I sent is /about, okay, let's just try that out as well. So /about, then it'll give me hello, this is about page, which is right here. Okay, and if neither of the two cases are valid, meaning if neither of those two cases match, for example, about blah 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 blah, this will not match, right? If I do enter, then it will throw me a 404 page not found, which is the default case right here. So I hope you guys understood till this much, right? So this is basically how you do your routing. Okay, this is what routing is. For every different URL, we are basically sending a different response. Now, instead of the text here, you can also send your HTML text. Okay, so instead of this, you can actually write h1. Let's do the same thing here, h1, and that with h1, and let's also do that in our 404 page, h1 /h1. Save that. Say node http. Let's go here. Let's refresh this up, and there you go. It is giving me this HTML header. All right. If I go to localhost 8000, hello, this is Node.js, and /about, this is the about page. So yeah, you can, we actually created a server, and now you're running JavaScript in our server, and this is what Node.js is all about. Okay, so we created the server, and we're also sending the response. Now let's also send index the HTML file as a response. All right, because in most of the real application, you'll be sending HTML files instead of just raw text and all those things. So let's create a file here called index.html. And let's create something right here. So let's change this title to just write Node.js crash course. And in our body, let's add a header, which is h1, and say welcome to Node.js crash course. All right, simple as that. And here if you go to our home page, we're not going to do this. All right, so I'm just gonna close this or remove this up. What you're going to do is when you go to our home page, we're just going to return index.html file here, or we're just going to send this file. So in order to do that, what you're going to do is use that file system module. Remember the fs.read file? We're going to use that. Okay, we're going to use this. So in our HTTP file, let's go here and call const fs equals to require fs, and here let's just say fs.read file, open the parentheses. The first parameter it'll ask for is the file that we want to open, which is /index.html. all right, and the second one is basically your callback, which consists of error and data. Okay, and data is nothing but whatever that's present inside your file. So let's open this function, and here what we're going to do is just write res.write data, and we're going to close the response, so res.end. So let's again run this http. Let's go here, refresh this, and there you go. Well, cool. That's really bad. Welcome. Yeah, welcome to Node.js crash course. So basically, now we are actually calling index.html file, or we are actually now sending this HTML file as a response to that particular request. Okay, now we are not sending a normal text file, we're sending the HTML file itself. Now when you're sending this file, you also need to send the response header. Okay, now because the browser needs to know what kind of file this is, whether this is a JSON file or whether it is an index.html file. Okay, you need to specify that. Okay, and you do that with the help of response header. So here, just below, just above res.write, we're going to create a header for this response. We're going to create a response header for this response, and for that we're going to say res.set header, and here it will basically expect two parameters. First one will be content type, okay, and the second parameter would be what the content type should be. Okay, so now since we're sending HTML file, this will be text/html. all right, save that. Let's do node http. Let's refresh this up. Now if you go to inspect, let's go to networks, and right now you have this localhost that is 200 blah blah blah. All right, let's click this up, and if you go down here, now you have a response header of content type of text HTML. So the browser now knows that you have now sent HTML as your, or the HTML file as a response. All right, now instead of sending HTML file, you can also send a JSON object. All right, so let's create a object called const, let's say data, and let this be an array of objects. So first will be id 0, name will be John. Copy this up, let's paste it here and here as well. So this is the id1, id2, Jane and Josh. All right. And here what we're going to do is create a new case. So case slash data, and here what you're going to do is just res dot set header, and again the first parameter will be the content type, and since we're sending a JSON object in this case, the second parameter will be, instead of text.html, this one will be application slash JSON. So application slash JSON, right? And here we're gonna say res dot write. Now we've already created this data, right? Now we need to convert this data into JSON object. So for that we have what is called JSON dot stringify. All right, and let's just pass the data here, and let's end the response res dot end. Okay, save that, and let's do node http. By the way, in order to come out of this, I'm just doing Control C. All right, that will end the process. Let's run this up. Let's go to Chrome and refresh this up. Now if you go to localhost 8000/data, there you go. We are now getting a JSON response. Now this is very useful while creating APIs and all sorts of things. All right, you create an endpoint, and when you go to that endpoint, you are basically getting this data. So again, there are a lot of things that you have in this HTTP. Since this is a crash course, I can't go into each and every details. All right, it's not a complicated documentation compared to others. If you know the backend stuff, if you know how the backend works or something like that, it'll really be easy for you, in order to get all these things. And even if you're not, then trying some stuffs on your own will really help you get along with the language as well as the environment, as well as you'll also improve immensely. So yeah, that's about the HTTP module and creating server. Now again, I know that I did not create an application in this crash course, right? No, just creating an application with just Node.js is really difficult. And so you have a third-party dependency like Express and all those things, but you still need to know some core modules of Node.js in order to get forward with Express or Passport or something like that. And the goal of this crash course was to help you understand how the modules work and what are the core Node.js modules, how you can create a small server and send response depending on the request that the user sends and things like that. All right, by the time that you're watching now, I might have already uploaded a crash course on Express, and that is a really good crash course to take after learning Node.js. With frameworks like Express and other awesome dependencies, you'll really be able to create a large scale applications with Node.js. But again, Node.js itself is not sufficient. I mean, it's sufficient, but it's really difficult to create. That's why you have the third-party dependencies. All right, so again, I hope this crash course was really helpful for you guys. I hope it helped you get started along the way with Node.js. So thank you for watching this crash course, and I'll see you guys in the next video.